Hello everybody, my name is Terminator Ty 17. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reviewing probably one of the most beloved British battleships both in the game and in real life, the HMS Nelson. Um, Now, I will say that first thing, before I even get anywhere into the ship's history or the ship's stats and analysis, I will say that the Nelson is a premium ship. It costs real money. It's 12,500 doubloons, which I think is 45-ish dollars, if I'm not mistaken. Somewhere around there. So just keep that in mind if you are interested in getting this ship. I'll certainly get into detail in that when in the actual stats video. But I think I'll do this series of the Nelson as the same way I did the North Carolina, where the first video, this video will be a history about the ship in real life, and then the second video will be the ship in the game, its stats, how it stacks up to other battleships of the tier, and then a little bit of gameplay to showcase the ship at the end. So, without further ado, let us get into the history here. So HMS Nelson, she was built as the lead ship of the Nelson class battleships for the Royal Navy in the 1920s. And she was named after Vice Admiral Lord Horatio Nelson, which he was a very famed hero and legend in British military history during the Napoleonic Wars. He won the famed Battle of Trafalgar against the French fleet, and since the Royal Navy won that battle, they actually stopped the French Emperor Napoleon, whose name probably rings a bell, from invading Great Britain. And so Admiral Nelson is probably the most famous, most beloved admiral, possibly even just military man in general in Britain's armed forces history. And I believe he also served in I want to say like Revolutionary War, but I'm not for sure. The ship was laid down on December 28th, 1922, and she was commissioned on August 15th, 1927, weighing in at 37,000 tons, and with that being a full combat load, and 709 feet long. So a little bit shorter than North Carolina, a little bit lighter than North Carolina. Her displacement was limited to the terms of the Washington Naval Treaty. However, she was limited, or she was allowed to be fitted with the 16-inch guns in response to the American Colorado class battleships and the Japanese Nagato class battleships, which those two names should probably ring a bell, since those are the names of two ships that are obviously in the game right now. And so to meet both the admiralties is like all the British, admirals and the kind of royalty that is involved with the Royal Navy. The admirals, but also kind of the politics as well. That is oversees the Royal Navy's operations and things like that. The admiralty's requirement of a powerful armament and the treaty's requirement of unlimited displacement. The British designers came up with this radical new design of having all of her 16-inch turrets in the front, which was a pretty radical design at the time. This is really one of the first ships that we see with the idea that if you have all your firepower in the front, then you don't have to go, full broadside and present a bigger target to your enemy, which certainly poses its advantages in the game as well. And it'd be later on that the French would kind of copy and be influenced by the design with their, Dunkirk and Richelieu and what have you. So going into a combat career in World War II, she had an uneventful start to the war, really, and she patrolled the waters off of Norway and Iceland up north. And she did actually help cover a convoy of merchant ships carrying iron ore from Narvik, Norway, which would be a job that she would be very accustomed to throughout the war. And on the 30th of October 1939, in the near the Orkney Islands near Scotland, Nelson was attacked by a German U-boat, U-56, and she was actually hit with 2 of the 3 torpedoes fired at her. But very, very fortunately for her crew, none of the torpedoes actually detonated. It slammed up against the hull and then sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Nelson and her sister ship Rodney gave way to a futile pursuit in hopes of catching up with the fast battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. After these 2 German raiders sank an armed merchant cruiser, but we all know how that probably ended up. If you've ever, experienced or played against the Scharnhorst or Gneisenau, even in the game, you can note that they are significantly faster than pretty much anything out there. So they were the Royal Navy Nelson-class battleships were not able to catch up. In December of 1939, the ship struck a mine off the Scottish coast, and she had to be sent for repairs in Portsmouth. And once her repairs were completed, she, Rodney, and the battlecruiser HMS Hood, which, if you're a big British battleship fan, should also ring a bell, were deployed to Iceland to counter the German auxiliary cruiser Admiral Scheer. The cruiser did not head in their direction and rather sailed towards the South Atlantic. And later, in the 25th of February 1941, Nelson, Rodney, and the battlecruiser Renown were sent to counter the battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau once again from breaking into the Atlantic, but the ships once again did not see action, as the 2 battleships smartly turned away at the last minute and were not pursued because of their high speeds. On April 1st, 1941, the ship became its own private entity, meaning it's not part of the home fleet. The home fleet is just another word for Atlantic Fleet that is later renamed the Atlantic Fleet. But basically, all the ships that served in the North Atlantic to kind of west of Great Britain was kind of all of that area was what the home fleet was comprised of. And so she was not a part of the home fleet while escorting convoy WS7 from the UK to the port of Freetown in the African nation of Sierra Leone. And she joined in company with the aircraft HMS Eagle, the carrier HMS Eagle, sorry. And after the 24th of May, 1941, when the famous battleship Bismarck, also in the game, was spotted in the Atlantic, the 2 ships headed towards the North Atlantic on an interception path to Bismarck, but ultimately did not see action against the battleship. But it should be noted that her sister ship Rodney actually fired on the Bismarck along with King George V, which is another really well-known ship, even at this tier in the game. In July of 1941, this ship escorted the convoy WS9 into the Mediterranean, with the destination being the tiny island of Malta, the only and increasingly significant British outpost in the Mediterranean that threatened Germany's supply lines to North Africa and Italy, a huge thorn in Germany and Italy's side. So Malta was you can look it up on Google Maps. It's not a very big island at all. It's just a small town and basically an airstrip and like one port. But this tiny island was really hampering all of the supply shipping going, in between Italy and North Africa during the time. And so the British are trying to maintain this vital kind of but only outpost they really have in the Mediterranean. They're trying to defend it and keep it open, keep that line of supplies to Malta going open. They, because Malta obviously needs food, medical supplies, ammo, planes, pretty much anything of military use is being shoved into Malta via transport merchant ship at this time. At the same time, the Germans are trying to cut off Malta's supply lines so they can surround the tiny island and either invade it or just surround it into starvation. Um, but over the following months, Nelson would offer numerous escorting duties to convoys heading to Malta, and she helped keep this vital British supply line, to the small island intact. In the following September, during another journey to Malta, a British force consisting of Nelson, Rodney, and various other escorts, along with the merchant ships, came under attack by Italian aircraft, and one of these aircraft, that happened to be a torpedo bomber, made its way through the AA screen and dropped a torpedo to hit the battleship. But fortunately, there were no casualties. Nelson continued to steam actually under her own power with the fleet in order to trick the Italians that she was not damaged, which the Italians did buy into. They thought that Nelson was perfectly fine, but in reality she had a huge problems in regards to her, I believe it was her frontal hull section, if I'm not mistaken. So emergency repairs were in Gibraltar. Those were made soon after. In November of 1942, she was involved in the Allied landings in Vichy, French-controlled Morocco, codenamed Operation Torch. Nelson, along with many other vessels that belonged to the Royal Navy, patrolled the waters around the landing sites in case the Italian Navy, the Regia Marina, decided to show up and defend the coastline, which they never did. But, better to be safe than sorry, I guess. Later, both Nelson and Rodney provided naval gunfire support in preparation for the amphibious invasion of Calabria, Italy, shelling mainly coastal artillery batteries in the process. And shortly thereafter, the sister ships bombarded the coast of Salerno in preparation for the American landings in mainland Italy as well. The Italian armistice between the Italian government and the Allied powers was signed actually on Nelson. That's a pretty cool fact. But obviously the Germans would go on to keep on fighting in Italy. So did it really change that much? Not really, but it's kind of cool to think that the Italians ended their war on Nelson's decks. That's kind of a cool little factoid. After that invasion, the ship was called back home for rest and overhaul, where she received improved AA defenses. On the 11th of June 1944, Nelson bombarded the coastline of Normandy in support of the famous D-Day landings. It should be noted that she wasn't actually there on June 6th, actually D-Day. She was placed in reserve. I believe Rodney was there on the actual date, but Nelson was not. She later came up a couple days later to help with shelling coastal targets, help the British troops who were now working their way inland of Gold Beach, and she fired 1,000 rounds of her 16-inch shells at various German targets. And on her way back to Portsmouth to rearm and refuel, the battleship struck two mines. One caused little damage as it went off only 50 feet from her starboard, so little damage there. But the other one went off beneath her bow, which caused significant flooding and heavy damage. But still, the mighty warship was able to limp back to port for repairs. However, the Royal Navy decided that the ship would be better off repaired in Philadelphia Navy Yard. And I tried searching as to what their thought process was. I didn't really find a clear answer. My assumption of why they would send it to America, the East Coast, for repairs, is likely because we have better dockyard and dockyard workers. We have better civilian participation in repairing ships and dockyards, and maybe they thought that they could just repair her faster. But then again, sailing her all across the Atlantic is a pretty slow process. So I don't really know. I don't really know why they sent her to Philadelphia, but they did. After repairs were completed in January 1945, she was ordered actually to the Pacific and operated in the Malayan Peninsula, and there she conducted shore bombardment of Japanese positions in this area until at the end of the war. And Nelson continued to serve as the flagship of the Home Fleet, or the Atlantic Fleet by now, as they renamed it, until July of that year. And it was only then that the now 20-year-old ship, she was pretty old by then, was placed in reserve in 1947. A year later, the ship was sold for scrap, so ending the Nelson's incredible career. So, just kind of summary recap of the Nelson's history. Great ship, state-of-the-art in the 1920s. Very radical design, meeting the 16-inch guns while having a pretty reasonably light displacement for a battleship was pretty innovative and an impressive feat by British engineers. I will say that Nelson was one of the what we call like the Big Seven. So the Big Seven were the only 7 battleships under all the naval treaties by all the ruling sea powers of the world. The Big Seven were the only ships at the time that had 16-inch guns, and Nelson and Rodney were 2 of the Big Seven. And then you have the Gatto is one, and Colorado and West Virginia are another couple. Yeah, that's the history of the HMS Nelson, and we will get to the gameplay in the next video.